That's a lot of bread right there. Oh my god. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to John Dudley Speaks. I'm your host, the Blair Witch Project. Philadelphia-based indie pop band Japanese Breakfast, spearheaded by Michelle Zauner, started off in 2013, initially uploading music to Tumblr and Bandcamp before Zauner moved back to Oregon to take care of her mother, where she recorded Tropical Jinx for Little Big League. Psychopomp was released under the Japanese Breakfast name in 2016, and it's a gem of an 80s influenced dream pop record that boasted Zauner's talents as a songwriter, a talent that was refined even more on the following year's Soft Sounds from Another Planet, which wrestled with shoegaze and lo-fi in a progressive way. Her best work until that point, Jubilee, dropped in 2021, and it's a fantastic synthesis of Zauner's influences, building on the 80s pastiche with modern indie folk aesthetics that are artful yet accessible, which brings us to For Melancholy Brunettes and Sad Women, the long-awaited return from Japanese Breakfast, and it's worth its anticipation with its Baroque pop sensibilities that are enveloping and emphasize humanity above all, leading to yet another winner in Michelle Zauner's repertoire. Produced by Blake Mills, who's known for his strong work with Perfume Genius, Lucy Dacus, Fiona Apple, and even the legendary Bob Dylan. So naturally, there's a ton of organic indie folk pop instrumentation on this record. The peaceful acoustic guitar parts on Here's Someone brilliantly sit beside the ethereal mix of the Wurlitzer and the mandolin, summoning a dreamy instrumental that's an entrancing, beautiful introduction to Mills and Zauner's world. Orlando in Love takes a comparatively down-tempo approach with its climbing, muted chords, but the juxtaposition of the minimalism to the maximal strings and the extravagant synths grants the music a transcendent quality that's full of vibrant life and character. I love the emphatic live drums on Honey Water, with the unique chord progressions in the guitars, inviting minor dissonance that calls back to the very best of Alex G, PJ Harvey, Mazzy Star, while the rockabilly dynamics of Mega Circuit and the traditional folk of Little Girl are bound together by the fantastic use of decadent reverb in the pianos. There's also a tinge of indie country folk on Picture Window and Men in Bars, each track exhibiting patience in its implementation of musical elements, not overloading the listener by stacking them, but instead parsing through each one with soothing slide guitars and booming drum passages that leave space for these songs to build into their climaxes. Mills also does a terrific job on the percussion with Winter in LA, which reminded me of the groove that Rick Rubin added to Biba Doobie's This Is How Tomorrow Moves last year, but with tranquil energy coursing through its veins. We leave on Magic Mountain, which is beautiful in its simplicity, much like the rest of this record, through its skillfully executed balance between ornate composition and sublimely sparse arrangement. One thing I've always admired about Michelle Zauner's songwriting capabilities is how she's able to remain so personal while discussing some pretty universal themes, and For Melancholy Brunettes and Sad Women might be her masterpiece in this regard. Conceived while Zauner was hard at work on her follow-up to Crying at H Mart, the bold snapshots of her life at this time period after Jubilee are fairly revealing, with Here Is Someone depicting the consternation she had been facing, but she doesn't shy away of outlining the importance of love in the midst of turmoil. Life is sad, but here is someone says a whole lot in this context, and it sets the tone for the ensuing 9 tracks. With references to Virginia Woolf and Renaissance-era poetry on Orlando in Love, Zauner points out the simultaneous intoxication and dread attributed to love and desire, highlighting the album's title through subtle nods to grief and lost time. Zauner's ruminations on loyalty and detachment on Honey Water, her reflections on modern masculinity and incel culture on Mega Circuit, and her descriptive lyricism surrounding the corruption of innocence due to generational trauma on Little Girl all show her flexibility in covering such wide-ranging topics, but it's all formatted through the lens of her own feelings and experiences. The tie that binds Zauner and her father on Leda is another side of that coin, detailing a semblance of hope for the future, despite the past having a stronghold on her views of love and stability. And it's that kind of appreciation and love that she explores on Picture Window and Men in Bars, with the former highlighting the intense sadness that we think of when pondering the loss of a loved one, while the latter superbly counterbalances this with the complexities of infidelity, and how none of us think it's possible until it occurs. Because of the strong writing that places us in Zauner's shoes like these tracks and Winter in LA, along with tight-knit song structures that complement her storytelling, we're left with an album that plays like an indie film, well constructed and well composed, without losing the personality and subtle humor that roped us in. The soft voice of Michelle Zauner propels these songs to astronomical heights due to the airiness and the light touch that they have, and Here Is Someone is a perfect opener to show how different this is to her previous material, most specifically Jubilee, Orlando in Love, Little Girl, Lita, and Magic Mountain display Zauner's vocal strengths and being able to find pockets that accentuate her inspirations, namely Joan Baez, Joni Mitchell, Bjork, and even My Bloody Valentine to an extent. And those spots exist not just to point out her passion and magnetism, but her playfulness like on Mega Circuit, her mournful blues on Men in Bars, and raw approach to alternative folk rock on Picture Window. Mills and Zauner do their absolute best to jive with the session musicians on this album, as all the instrumentation swells in the mix, but it's performed with such imperfect perfection, allowing the vulnerability to be felt in the instrumentals as much as her heartbreaking vocals. Speaking of heartbreaking, Jeff Bridges brings a wonderfully spare performance to Men in Bars that doesn't clash with Zauner's angelic delivery, yet props it up with a truly affecting synthesis of ruggedness and gracefulness. Because of versatile moments like that, this album benefits from such an extraordinary level of talent that goes far beyond vocal range and instrumental grandeur. And that's all due to the musicians at the forefront of it understanding where and when to emphasize emotion and where and when not to. With 10 tracks at a brisk 32 minutes, this is a fantastic listening experience that's as comforting as it is intriguing, never stalling in its pacing but never racing by without a care. Here Is Someone and Orlando in Love occupy the same space tonally to start off the album, but Honeywater smartly picks things up with a fuller sound that bleeds into Mega Circuit quite nicely, but with a dual centerpiece like Little Girl and Lita grounding the heart of the record, that crux beautifully anchors Zauner's themes and adherence to atmosphere, which gives way to Picture Window, Men in Bars, and Winter in LA to hit all that much harder, now that we understand her point of view a whole lot more as we sit with her. So when we finally reach a stunning bare bones moment on the back end of the record like Magic Mountain, you feel connected to Zauner way more than you realized you would be. And that's because of the effort to sequence this album with connection in mind. For Melancholy Brunettes and Sad Women is a sweeping indie pop gem that's authentic, genuine, and strikingly emotive, providing a window into Michelle Zauner's soul that we haven't gotten yet and won't soon forget. It's the best Japanese breakfast album so far, in my opinion, and I can see this one being quite important over the course of its existence, as we all begin to reflect on the passage of time more, because this is a wondrous statement not just about that, but about loving and growing and figuring out what it all means at the end of the day. But hey, that's just my perspective. If you're a Japanese breakfast fan, this is a marvelous record. And if you're in search of a dreamy folk pop album that ponders the long-standing complications of love and desire, you're gonna want to check this one out. Alright, that's all I got. Bye!